You've tested everything. Staging looks perfect. You deploy to production and nothing works. Sounds familiar? The problem isn't your testing. It's your entire development philosophy. We've gone from it works on my machine to it works in staging, and both are equally wrong. Today, we're talking about production-first development. Welcome to Going to Production podcast. All right, David, I'm going to share an example. We'll start with an example this time, and I'm going to hand it over to you to let me know what you think. I've gone through a rush delivery recently. So we went through...
This doesn't sound good.
We went through development, and we got our code in development. We got things running. And because we were rushed, we're saying, we don't need staging. We're going to bypass staging and go straight to production. We got stopped. And they were like... DevOps police, in this case, they were like, no, you can't go to production without going to staging first. We're like, okay. So we got set back a week so we could go to staging. We go to production. We realized the ugly truth. Production is nothing like staging.
Surprise.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Have you gone through that before?
And so, the whole idea is like, forget about staging environments. Forget about the idea of staging environments. And as our conversation continues here, I'm going to challenge that to say, forget about production environments, but I'll have to qualify that. Years ago, we would advocate for what's called the 12-factor application. I'll let everybody go figure that one out, 12-factor application. But I'll just give you this, that it is in terms of microservices, right? Very, very heavy into microservices. And also into portability of the microservices, moving between environments. It's that kind of thing. One of the factors in there is called parity between environments.
Right.
Parity between environments. And
elaborate.
This one has always been kind of near and dear to me because I always agreed with it. It really, really did make sense. Parity between environments is when you move your applications, your services or whatever, between an environment, both environments are the same or, in parity between them. Right. And so when you move your application between the environments, all you're going to do is change configuration values. You would never, ever recompile between environments. That's an awful idea.
Where did we hear that before?
Yeah, I know.
Right.
So you're never going to recompile. You're hopefully never going to move folders with it, or things like that. It's just, you're simply going to change environment variables because connection strings change, right? Or other credentials or anything like that may change. Logging levels might change. You might, turn them down as you get closer to production.
Right.
So parity between environments. The challenge is, as over the years, as I've advocated for this and then lived it myself, what I have found is it's very easy actually to develop good services that are configuration driven, and you can run them locally using some container manager and feed in all the environment variables and everything, and then take it up to another environment and do about the same thing, right? But the change is the networks and possibly the database, and most importantly, permissions.
Right.
And it just, as I sit back and look at it now, it's just such a bad idea because why you shouldn't be changing those things. You should be developing with those permissions already around you, those restrictive permissions around you. Now, I understand, the developer needs to get in, they're developing, right? They need to get into the database and see, whatever, the shape of the data or what's going on to develop. Right. So I understand that, there are some caveats there, but really once you move away from your desktop developing, where, you should have an unbelievable amount of permission there, you should immediately go into a production-like environment, right? Where you are super restricted and the things that are at the edge are very thoughtful, even though you're probably working on a domain that is totally internal still. But if you're developing if you move up to an environment off your desktop that is just a little bit more restrictive, but not completely,
Right.
and then the one after that is a little bit more restrictive, then you're not developing for production, and you're going to run into, "It worked in the past environment, but it doesn't work here."
All right, I'm going to throw you a curveball. But David, there's the concept of production drift. We got a critical bug. We had to solve it. Our users couldn't access the system. We had to respond fast.
Yeah.
So we made changes to production.
Oh, I mean, and it's life, right? So I'm not gonna take the high horse here. I'm not gonna take the high road and say like, "Well, you shouldn't ever change anything in production."
Right.
Like, that is not the world that we live in.
Right.
Things are going to happen there. I would say though that, there is I guess, a middle ground there. And actually, interestingly enough, I've 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 recently been introduced, not that recently actually, introduced into Terraform's, cloud development
Mm.
kit, CDKTF.
Okay.
It is very difficult to work with, and in all the time that it took me, to develop with it, I questioned all my decisions in life.
Nice.
As we went along, I really did. And even, like, I was the one advocating for it because I did see the power of it, and I was pushing the business to think about this,
Right.
and I cannot tell you how many times I'm like, "Oh, man, did I make the right decision? Did I do oh my gosh." Now, I'm in hindsight. We've made it. It works. We're in production using CDKTF,
Right.
and we can handle these situations because there are certain levels of, I guess, should I say change that Terraform may or may not care about.
Hmm.
And this is very nuanced to the provider that you're using. So I understand, like, this,
Like,
this
it
still
could be
would
in
apply to you even if you're not using Terraform.
So you could be in AWS, Azure,
Anywhere. Yeah,
on-prem,
doesn't matter.
whatever there's provided.
The dynamics of Terraform, that's a different thing. But the whole difference is if the service is configuration driven, then I can go in and change an environment variable for that service, and Terraform doesn't care.
Okay.
As far as Terraform is concerned, I am still in the state that it's expecting. So then I could turn around and do a Terraform deployment on it, and it's not going to try to gut everything and recreate everything and like set all the environment variables back.
Right.
There are certain levels of different configurations that Terraform is just not watching.
Right.
And it's probably a nuance of the providers that I'm using. In this case, we're using Elastic Container Services. And it just so happens that Elastic Container Services uses the notion of a kind of a deployment. I don't remember the specific name for it, but you set up the configuration of your service, and then you replicate that configuration over and over again, right? Very Kubernetes, very, very Kubernetes-esque. I can go in and change the configurations. We had this problem. We went to production. It was our first deployment. We went to production, and one of the buckets configured for one of the services was wrong.
Right.
It was pointed at the wrong bucket.
Oh.
Now, let's not argue about using buckets. That was a different topic. But it was like, oh my gosh, this thing's not working. It's broken. Now, in typical fashion, you would have to go in, recompile the application, change those values, send them up, and now you're back to, well, we got to go through integration testing, end-to-end testing. You got to go through staging. You got to go, to get up production.
So 2 weeks later.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. For the simplest thing. And in this case, I'm like, oh, well, that is a environment variable. That is just a configuration value. And it turns out our infrastructure, or the thing managing our infrastructure, doesn't care about environment variables. So I just went directly into that ECS service, changed the environment variable. Everything was magically, it had to restart the service.
Right.
And then magically everything's just fine. And we didn't have any sort of drift because Terraform is going to be super happy still. And we can show up with another deployment and we're fine.
Oh, that sounds nice.
Yeah.
So there is a world where you could have automation and an ability to really support is probably the better way to think about it, production when things are not going correct.
And I mean, the other side of it though is if there is, so that was just a configuration issue,
Right.
right? And so we're in production, configuration issue, change it. And I would say like it was pretty smooth having done that.
Right.
But if there's actual logical business that, that needs to be, or sorry, business decisions that need to be changed, you're not going to be able to just like change a configuration value most likely,
Right.
right? That's going to be a code change.
So let me ask this. What you just described is you're building infrastructure, you're building scripts in and those capabilities, technically production first.
Absolutely.
Tell me more.
Well, I mean, it's, in hindsight, in lots of hindsight of making, making the choice. I don't think it's a mistake, but a choice over and over again of having the notion of a staging environment, starting with the idea of a staging environment.
Yeah.
And then, having the best intentions of, yes, we're going to have this because we need to have QA. We need to have, someone signing off on this, but they need to see the whole thing running. Having that idea, and then saying, okay, well, then we're going to move it up to production, but we're only going to do like thin slices.
Right.
Our changes are going to be super small, right? So we're going to iterate really quickly, but we're going to go through these different environments. And then you go in and you start making all of this. And it's like, okay, well, I want to be super thoughtful about what staging is and what production is. And I want to keep as much parity between the two as possible.
Right.
But when you get to a point where you have to say, like, I want to keep as much parity as possible, you're dead. Like, that's it, right? If you're developing right off your desktop to move directly into production, you may not. But if that's the way you're developing, to go directly into production, it's not this event. It's not so scary, I guess,
Right.
because it's like I made this thing to run in production. I know where I'm going to be in production, and that's what I'm running for. And if something happens, I guess the power of immutability probably comes in here somewhere, right? Because you need to be able to kill things very quickly and start them up again, and be able to move very quickly to deal with this.
So let me get this straight. When most engineers and really most companies out there, the classic approach has been, I'm going to stand up a development environment so I could be able to experiment and try things and really deliver things. Then from there, if everything looks good, I'm going to promote it to a staging environment.
Yeah.
And then if everything looks good there, then I'm potentially
Going to go to QA.
go to QA, then I'm going to go to performance testing, then I'm going to go to load testing, and I'm going to do like a few QAs. And then eventually UAT, and UAT says, yep, everything looks good, push it to production. But then surprisingly, I've seen environments where there's pre-prod.
Oh, I hate that name. I hate that environment name.
And then we go to prod. Why? Well, pre-prod, the argument is pre-prod is the closest to production. So what you're saying is, if I'm catching what you're saying correctly, you're saying is my scripts, my automation is production scripts, production automation. I can choose to create other environments that look like production.
Environment is really just a name.
It's just a name.
I mean, it really, really is just a name. It's not a network. It's potentially not a database. It doesn't represent any of those like certain configured objects or anything like that. It is a name.
Interesting.
And it's because humans need names and need these things. But as far as the codes and the computers are concerned, it's running.
So it's not this concept of going back to business process, a handoff kind of thinking. We call it promotion, but it's like, oh, first we go to dev, and then we go to stage, then we go to or QA, and then we go to stage, then we go to pre-prod, then we go to prod. It's really not the concept of that. It's more like a concept of, hey, we made some changes. I don't want to push them to production right away. So I want to stand up an environment so I could try this out.
Okay, and so I want to share with you a project that we just completed recently. Our client had software that had been created, a cloud service that had been created about 10 years ago.
Okay.
Been running for a while,
Yeah.
and had been managed by a lot of different developers. Most of the developers didn't completely understand what they were doing or what they were managing,
Right.
but they were
Context,
managing it.
obviously.
Yeah.
Right.
We are now tasked with, they wanna break it up into, better microservices. They just wanna, you know, make everything better, right? But also, they want to be able to do a security audit, like a cloud security audit on it. And yes, there are all kinds of fun tools out there that will give you ridiculous dashboards and reports and all that stuff, and in my opinion, are in the end, more data and useless than you could ever have, right? So what we decided to do, and this is where I was introduced to CDKTF.
Mm.
We went in, first of all, I don't know Terraform. I don't want to know Terraform.
Right.
I stay far away from HCL and all of that craziness. But I know programming languages, I know runtimes well, and I can develop things well in those runtimes. In this case, the client was C sharp. So we use C sharp with CDKTF and 100% completely defined all of the infrastructure. The microservices were already made, right? All of that in CDKTF. They're on AWS. We used ECS, we used API gateways, we used CloudFront,
Mm.
all the proper things, and the web application firewalls. We used everything in their best practices, but it was 100% in code to do it.
Interesting.
And now, looking back on it, it is simply amazing because we completely removed the need to name environments. Whatever you want to, like, do a bunch of development on all your microservices, right? Gather up all the versions of the microservices that you want. That's going to be a snapshot.
Right.
Deploy that. That's a deployment, and it's going to get some URL, domain name, right? There you go. Everybody go in and look at that. Sign off on it. Do whatever you want with it. That's the thing.
Nice.
Then switch DNS to that deployment.
Interesting.
Yes. So you're not promoting anything anywhere. And what everybody signed off on is literally the things that are going to actually be the production service. So switch DNS over to this new deployment and DNS, 24 hours, 48 hours, all that good stuff. And you're there. Tear down the old environment and continue on with life. And you can do a small, the size of the deployment is just up to you. Right?
Right.
And there is no more staging or production or anything like that. We just don't talk in those terms. It just kind of happened. But it's like the portability of being able to make changes and move them around, and the confidence that everybody got in making changes was awesome.
So that's very interesting. So in that case, then you're actually optimizing your resources. You're cleaning up unused.
Because everything's in code, the security audit is basically a code audit, right? Everything is configured and defined in code. So if you want to know the security stance or how a security group is configured or who's using that or how the firewalls are set up, just go look at the code and you will get a definitive answer. And it's so much easier to do that than running security audit tools and all that stuff.
Right.
Oh, sorry.
It sounds like everybody should be using this.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. It's really hard. It is. It was really difficult. A big learning curve there. And I can understand why the adoption is just not really taken off with it. But in hindsight, I love it, but I will pick and choose when I use it.
Right. But the pattern is, I think, is the important part.
Yeah.
So your pattern is, from what I grasp what you just said, we are building a runtime environment. This runtime environment, we can label as production. We can label it as something that I want to try this other thing on. We could label it as this is pre-prod, And then with your DNS capabilities, the pattern is we
Just change DNS.
could do blue-green deployments kind
Yeah.
of thinking. We just change DNS. So you're bringing in the patterns of blue-green deployment, the ability to stand
Sure.
up
Yeah.
an environment, not necessarily a production thing.
Yeah.
It's just that this is how the environment should look like for deployment. And then you just name what that
I
is.
guess we're moving the edge to the deployment instead of moving the deployment up to the edge.
Up to the edge, which sounds very interesting.
In this next episode, we're going to challenge the biggest assumption in software development, that developers are supposed to be writing code. Thank you for listening to Going to Production. Please consider subscribing to our podcast, and we'll see you on the next one.